Patrick, Alberta elections. Turns out UCP wins. Why? By the way, why do you call it UCP? We don't call it UCP here in Ontario. We just call it Conservative Party.
Yeah. United Conservative Party. It's about being united. So UCP.
Is that? But is that a new thing? Like, I'm honestly asking. I don't know. You know me. I don't follow politics. I mean, I'm not.
Well,
I'm not dialed in like you are.
I don't know that it's a new thing. I mean, it is relatively new. I don't know when they adopted it, but that was, that's the thing now. So it's a Conservative Party to me. I'm still old school.
Okay. So the blue wins. Are they blue in Alberta too, or do you guys have different color schemes over there? I know Alberta likes to do things a little different.
Okay, as you wear the infamous NDP colors, no, Alberta is mostly blue. Surprisingly, shockingly, weirdly, I guess maybe not. It's to be expected. Edmonton is all 20 ridings NDP. And I'm going, what the heck is going on in Edmonton? But again, government town, so not surprised. Interesting that good that the election went the way it was and the way it did. And I think it's really important. When we look at what's happening politically in Alberta, we have to consider, really what is driving that economy. And the policies that NDP tend to adopt are going to be like federal policies. They follow along with what the Liberal government is doing federally as well as Jagmeet. And they're not independent really that way. So they follow those politics, those policies, which include a lot of taxation. So I'm only going to say that in terms of what's happening in Alberta, the story, aside from what's going on with healthcare, what's going on in the oil industry, what's going on with the expansion of the economy, we have to really consider I think that Alberta is a taxation game. So if we can manage taxes, which Alberta has done pretty good over the years, would have been far worse if we would have went NDP. I think that's a game we got to play.
Patrick, you have a very difficult decision to make now, because you made a commitment on this show only a couple weeks ago that if NDP got in, you would sell everything you owned in Alberta. I was waiting to buy some of your properties at a fire sale. Like, I got my checkbook ready here. Now, PC won, or the UCP won. But NDP won Edmonton, and you're mostly in Edmonton. So what are you going to do now? Are you going to sell it all, or what are you doing?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm going to keep a close eye on it. The good news is that UCP has a majority government. And, as many people as say, Danielle Smith is going to be vindictive and she's going to, kind of really push hard and be bad for Edmonton. That's not how politics work. And any politician, whether it be Danielle Smith or Rachel Notley, any politician, period, their job is to get reelected. She's been, Danielle Smith was elected. Her job now is to get reelected. So this whole story and narrative that they throw out there about her being vindictive would be self-defeating. What she's got to do is go in and prove NDP wrong. She's got to go in with some fantastic policies, some really great initiatives, which I'm confident they'll do. And so at the end of the day, I'm going to be watching it very closely to see just how things unfold.
But I will tell you this, Patrick, you just said that her job's get reelected. Unfortunately, that's what they think their job is. That's not actually their job, but that's what they often think their job is. And that's why they get absolutely nothing done. So Danielle Smith and anybody else who got elected, please get it done. Don't just focus on getting reelected. That's the most important thing.
I think there's a couple of aspects, which is just fiscal responsibility. And when you look at what NDP is built on, these are social programs. I have no issue with that. At the end of the day, when I look at what I expect from a government, from politicians, is that we are paying taxes, and I want the money that I'm paying to them to spend. I want it spent well. I want it to have some thought. I want budgets. I want, cutbacks where cutbacks need to be made in the government, not more bureaucracy, not more administration. We can take that off on a whole tangent about why we're in the position we're in the shortage of housing was because of bureaucracy. We keep throwing layers of bureaucracy in, which seems to drive jobs, but at the end of the day, it's a non-productive scope of work. And that's where I get really kind of fired up about how the UCP kind of philosophy is versus, the NDP philosophy is versus the UCP philosophy.
I had an interesting encounter this week, Patrick. Was it this week or last week? It was in the last week with politics. I'm not big on the politics thing, not like you are. But I was one of the local councillors here reached out to me and wanted to meet with me about some housing developments we're working on. So I thought, yeah, let's do it. So I went and met with this chap, let's call him, and we had a very fascinating debate. Let me tell you, for a little while there, it was going off the rails, but we had a very interesting debate right there on the site, because we're building coach homes, and he, as a counselor, is getting a lot of pushback from people, the NIMBYism. And he happens to live in the community. He lives on the block where I'm building. And let me tell you, he had a lot of things to say. But what was fascinating, and I won't, I'll spare the details of the hour interaction we had. But I'll tell you where it ended. First of all, he invited me to his place for a beer at the end, so it ended well, obviously. But what we ended up discussing on is, and I pointed out to him that he was entirely, not only he, but the entire neighborhood is entirely focused on the 1% chance that it all goes wrong. What if we get the wrong tenant? What if we get a bunch of party animal students in there? What if this happens? And it's like such a narrow margin of, yes, some rentals end up going that way. But I said to him, 99.8% of the time, you don't end up with that. You end up with a good family, a good working couple, someone who needs a home to live in. And this is what that is providing. And, he was very, very focused on that. What if it goes wrong percentage, which is like 1%. And I was able to agree with him. I said, well, what if it goes right? Will you be our advocate? Will you go to the counselor? Will you go to the city and show them how this does work when it goes right? And he committed to doing that. So I'm going to keep this show and everybody in the loop on how that goes, because I'm going to tour him around all of our other developments where it did go right. It wasn't a terrible idea. It turned out really well. It increased property values. It did all the right things so that we can get over this NIMBYism that just continues to happen, because this was just another version of that. And it's funny how, even it happens to everybody, and anyone who's in real estate doing this is going to have to face it. So anyways, it was a fun interaction, Patrick, that ended up going in the right place in the end.
Well, I love that you had that conversation. There's a fundamental Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I think that politicians don't take the time, many don't. And you had a conversation with somebody that you had to kind of beat up a little bit in terms of a debate around, no, you need to listen, you need to see another perspective. I would argue this from this point in that kind of a conversation, which is, here's my track record. I manage over 400 doors or 500 doors, whatever you're up to these days, JG, and I'm in the trenches of rental properties. What's your track record? And then what is the solution for what you're offering in terms of the housing problem? You're talking about specifically in Peterborough, I believe. And, when you look at what's going on, you're no different. Peterborough is no different than every other city in this country. When we look at the immigration that's coming in, the people that are living on the street, people are being pushed out. So let's just compare housing solutions, if you will, to the results that these different municipalities are getting, and they're going to lose every single time. So I'm glad you debated it, and I'm glad that you at least opened up to listening to that. Those are the kind of things that this is where leadership gets in the way, because again, they want to try and appease that 1% of squeaky wheels. Not everybody's a NIMBY. But they're the squeakiest wheel, so that's who politicians listen to.
And what's funny, and there's some fascinating things about this conversation. First of all, this counselor is a real estate investor. He owns a couple real estate investments. Interesting. But funny how, and by the way, that he was very, very, the conversation went in the direction of what he was really afraid of was student rentals. That's what he was afraid of, by the way. He really didn't want a bunch of students in there. And then what ended up happening is he's a real estate investor. He rents to that very demographic profile. Like, that's who he rents to as students. He told me that himself. I mean, I'm not making this up. He told me he has rentals for students, but he didn't want a student rental in his backyard. So really, Patrick, at the end of the day, it's just another form of NIMBYism. It's like, I can do this elsewhere. It's okay over there. I just don't want it here where I live because of this community. Which is just, and we had to have some conversation to get him to understand that. How does that make any sense, And still, there was
a little bit of understanding there, Patrick, but I got to tell you
that he was really like, he was pushing his point and he wasn't open to much.
Wow. That's, they shouldn't call it politics in this case. They should call it hypocrites. And that would be more appropriate given this MLA that you were dealing with. That is sad, but it's too common.
Yeah, too common, unfortunately. Anyways, But at the end of the day, I got to hand it to him because he did listen. We had a great conversation. He invited me to his place for a beer, which is great. I couldn't go. I had another meeting. But I will take him up, and I opened up the door. And I think if other real estate investors are listening to this, I opened up the door to let me show you what happens when it goes right. And I'm going to show him this. I'm going to show him various projects we've done in that community, literally within doorsteps, where it's like, look at all the positives, and hopefully he starts to see it a little bit more our way. We'll see.
Fantastic. Good job, JG.
Alberta election politics complete.
If you like what you learned here, go to the description below and subscribe for our free Insiders newsletter, where you can also stay up to date for our upcoming events and our courses.
If you want to see more stuff like this, click here. If you want to see the entire show, click there.